Hello there, this is One Step Past. I'm Bucky Wild, and welcome to the year 1932. Everything that I show you in this video is specific to that year. Before we get to the main feature, I'd like to tell you about some comic strips and a major cartoon star, all of which made their first appearances in 1932. Comic strip debuts of 1932. Pete the Tramp. This is a funny comic strip about a friendly hobo character, and it was around for a long time, like many of the comic strips that I'll be telling you about. Henry. He was a bald-headed little boy who didn't speak, but he always made trouble. Grinnin' Barrett. This is just a gag-a-day cartoon panel. Very funny, though. Napoleon and Uncle Elby. Funny dog strip. Napoleon's the dog. Alley Oop, the famous caveman character. It was an adventure strip, and it was also funny. Very offbeat kind of comic strip I always found. Entertaining, I really enjoy it, but it's certainly different. It's not a straight action, and I wouldn't say that it's a straight comedy strip either. Jane. Now, this is more popular in its native Britain than it is in the United States. However, it has been put into TV shows and movies that some people do see here stateside. It's a funny adventure strip that manages to find ways of partially undressing its heroine. It's still racy nowadays, but let alone in 1932, this had to be mind-blowing for some ultra-conservative people. But it's a good solid comic strip. Humorous. I think the strip is probably better than some of the TV and movie adaptations that have been made of it. And now, the major cartoon star who made his debut in 1932. Can you guess who it is? Come on, guess. I'll give you a few seconds. In the meantime, if you like what you see in this video, subscribe. One Step Past is all about presenting history in fun, interesting ways. There is a lot in store for you already on this channel, and much more to come. Now, for the unveiling of 1932's soon-to-be cartoon megastar, Goofy. Like a lot of great actors, Goofy started out as a bit player in the cartoon Mickey's Revue. He looked much different then, and was named Dippy Dog. It wouldn't take long for Disney to update his look and name. Stay tuned after the main feature to hear about popular songs and movies, all from the year 1932. And now, dun 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 dun!
As soon as we can get enough of the platform committee sober enough to turn in a platform, we'll be through. Seems unusual to see anyone up here speaking impromptu, you know. Everybody has their speeches written out, you know. Even a splendid address by the minister. You know, he read his prayer. You know, you can't... You can't think of anything offhand that will, you know, that will impress the Lord enough to help a Democrat nowadays.
One good thing about the Reds, they always give advance notice when they're going to have a party. And so the cops are ready and waiting. Today they're all worked up about the recent riot in Dearborn, Michigan. And they decide to stage a protest rally in front of the New York Ford branch. The rally part of it's all right, but when it comes to making speeches and stopping traffic, that's a horse of a different color, red in this case. And all the chief's horses and all the chief's men get on the job to keep everybody moving, and that means everybody. The communists revert to their old tactics, breaking up into small groups, but that don't go either. So the boys and girls have to find themselves another camping ground, while Automobile Row has something else to tell the wife and family when it goes home for dinner. Exciting while it lasted, but nobody gets hurt very much. There's always something, isn't there? The end of the long, long trail that brought immortal fame to the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic. After her 13-hour trip from Harbor Grace, Miss Earhart's greeted by a pouring rain. That's gratitude. But she's on her way to the American Embassy, where she spends a little time with Ambassador Mellon, all dressed up in some clothes borrowed from Mrs. David Bruce, daughter of Mr. Mellon. You see, all that Amelia took across was $20 and a bottle of tomato juice. And if you don't think she's raring to go shopping, you just watch her leave number 14 Prince's Gate, bound for London's biggest shops. Miss Earhart made a great personal hit over there. They recognized the magnitude of her triple achievement, broke all transatlantic records, first woman to fly alone, and the first person to fly across the ocean twice. And the whole world shares America's pride in the First Lady of the Air.
The menace of the gangster was never brought out so clearly as now, when you see this terrible boatload of rods and gats and typewriters, to use their own slang, that if there's any fish out there in the Atlantic Ocean that wants to start a war, now's his chance. It's the result of a year's accumulation, and they paid good money for him, too. And like all big businessmen, they certainly must have expected a return on their investment. That's why the police are doing such a notable service to the community in taking the stuff for a ride and dumping it out into the deep blue sea. Now all they have to do is dump the gangsters right after them, and everything will be swell.
Once more, the good old Reds look for trouble. This time, they try to go calling on the Japanese consul to protest against the war in China. But it seems you mustn't go calling without being invited. And pretty soon, the jolly old clubs begin to beat a jolly old tune on the red head. It begins to look like a scene from the very war they're objecting to. And Michigan Avenue takes on the appearance of the Western Front, only not so quiet. But it's more than a mere protest meeting. Shots have been fired. 5 people have been wounded, 4 of them policemen. And the cops are looking for the gunman. They're gradually closing in on him, and they're arresting Reds left and right. It's turned into a serious business, and they finally get the man suspected of doing the shooting, Mr. Steve Chuck, a gentleman who's in bad for fair right now, and who probably wishes he were far, far away. And they got you, Steve. The Reds become a little more discreet as the casualties grow more numerous. After all, the police don't agree with the policy of protesting against war with a .22 automatic. It makes them see red. The first circulars reach the east and are handed out by Police Chief Walter of Trenton with instructions to plaster the whole community. This means that the United States Department of Justice has entered the picture by distributing these circulars to more than 1,400 different cities. Millions of people will see the appeal, and there's a chance that somebody might notice one of the posters who'd recognize little Charles Lindbergh and so furnish a valuable clue. Meanwhile, the child is still gone, and the parents are suffering tortures that only fathers and mothers can suffer. And for their sake, as well as to suppress the unbelievable impudence of the underworld, it is our fervent hope that the child might soon be found and the gangsters brought to justice.
Twice in a few weeks, the government has struck. This time, a brewery on South State Street, said to belong to Al Capone. It's a scene of joy or sorrow, depending on how you feel about it. Either way, you're seeing $80,000 worth of destruction. And while these men do the dirty work, other agents found a truck loaded with beer ready for delivery. The same truck captured in another raid last April and sold at auction by the government. That's one for the book. Anyhow, there'll be a lot of dry throats in Chicago after this night's work. Oh, well.
Well, the war is on. One side says yes, the opposition says no. Of course, they've been saying all that in French, but a bathing suit's a bathing suit as far as the eye's concerned in any language. And so the fight rages pro and con, and these scenes are right from the battle trenches on the Western Front, uncensored, depicting the horrors of war, the naked truth, so to speak. Sometimes it's hard to show real life in the raw, but we never shrink when duty calls, no matter what comes up. And incidentally, how thankful we should be that we have our eyesight. Tony is looking for someone, and he finds his old pal, none other than Tom Mix. Together, Tom and Tony have had plenty of adventures. And naturally, Tony's been a little anxious about his boss. Tom, you know, has been pretty sick, but he's coming along in great shape now, and today he's getting a little air out on the lawn of his estate. This is the first real get-together Tony and Tom have had since illness split up the famous combination. When you've been sick and you're getting well again, boy, that's when food looks good. And even though you're having a reunion, you've got to eat. But you can't eat alone when Tony's around. You know, a well-trained horse like Tony would easily get rusty if he were allowed to. And so Tom puts the old boy through his paces, just to keep him in trim. Well, it won't be long before Tom and Tony will be back again. Tom is almost ready to go to work on a new picture. Well, so long, Tom. See you in the movies. The very latest from Gay Paris, where men are frequently men, and women wear feathers instead of hair. This one's made out of pearl swan feathers in a windblown bob effect. Boy, that's hot stuff. Here's an Australian feathered creation that'll make 'em all turn around and look. They certainly can think 'em up over there. Incidentally, the idea is to have 'em match your gowns. This is another windblown effect made of white swan feathers. How the swans will suffer next season. This is green with fantasy of green burnt rooster feathers. It's called foliage bergère, but it's still feathers. And here's a wig of flame swan's breast. I think they call this one Chanticleer. It's a great collection, all right. There's that green burnt rooster, and the curled swan's breast, and black Chinese burnt goose, and pink vulture with black Chinese curled swan. One thing they haven't got, and that's horse feathers. More than 3,000 visitors have come from the surrounding Florida resorts to see the big fashion show they hold every year. But see what 1932 brings us. The two-piece ensemble will be very popular with the young masculine set this year, made of knitted jersey cloth, with shirt and panties. Coat and trousers also will be worn, with hat made of straw, and the boys will have, oh, so many different color combinations to make their hot weather selections from. A different outfit for every occasion is the slogan for next summer, for bridge and for tea. And for the matinee, my, what a jolly season it's going to be.
The City Soviet building in Novosibirsk is the scene of an unusual event, a giant lottery for the benefit of the 5-year plan. The money obtained to be used for building factories and giant tractor and machinery stations. Every 100th number wins 5,000 rubles, a stake that tempts all the Siberian sports to unroll the old sock. More than 40 different races are present, 40 sets of minds with but a single thought, even though they are Soviets. But human nature's the same all over, and 5 grand is 5 grand, whether it's rubles or dollars. And if you want to know how it feels to be a winner, take a look. My goodness, it's warm in here.
Through the Place de la Concorde, the great cortege slowly passes between solid lanes of grieving citizens. The mortal remains of President Paul Doumer are followed by the great world figures, the Duke d'Aosta of Italy, the Prince of Wales, Prince Paul of Serbia, the Emperor of Annam, and other famous dignitaries from every civilized nation on the globe. Great judges and members of the bar, high military and naval officers to their friend and chief, murdered by a Russian fanatic. The second president of France to fall at the hands of an assassin. The new president, Albert Lebrun, is one of the chief mourners, and close behind him is King Albert of Belgium, also here to join. As you know, President Doumer was shot while he attended a sale of books for the benefit of wounded war veterans, a crime that shocked the whole world. The veterans were close to his heart, 4 sons in the war.
It's a sorry day for France, and she pays the highest honors in her power to her late president. At the Cathedral of Notre Dame, the Requiem High Mass is to be celebrated by Cardinal Verdier, Bishop of Paris. France is not alone in her bereavement. The world grieves with her.
Sai Road, Tientsin's Broadway, the flower of Japan's army marches north in full battle strength through the town, the last obstacle before they hit the southern tip of Manchuria. Confident, with complete battle equipment, they salute their commander, General Kashi, glad to leave the city, which is threatened with influenza epidemic. In a short while, Manchuria's last defense will fall before their advance. Their story is that they must wipe out the bandits in Manchuria, a noble ambition. And in the meantime, the Great Wall at Shanhai Quan, which has seen plenty of trouble, begins to show some life as the defending troops of the 9th Brigade of Marshal Chang's army, under the command of General Ho, are sent to their station. It's at this point that the wall is cut for the tracks of the Peking-Mukden Railroad. 2 days they remain at their posts, loyal and brave, ready to give up their lives to stop the invasion. But the advance is too powerful. They'll have to retreat, overcome by superior numbers, defeated by force of circumstance, but not licked.
Shanghai's Broadway, the Bund. Tense, expecting the worst. Only those with important business venturing outdoors, while in Qinchao, at the airfield, Major Hirata, commanding the 8th Japanese Flying Squadron, gives final instructions to the best pilot in the service. Instructions that ended in a horrible episode that shocked the world. Calm, cold messengers of death on their way to send a shower of destruction from the skies. It's not far from Qinchao to Shanghai, and it won't take long for the crack 8th Squadron to reach their objective, the native city of Chapai on the north bank of the Suqiao River in Shanghai. One breathless moment, and then all hell breaks loose. It's a scene that beggars the imagination, a chapter from Dante's Inferno. The marksmanship of the flyers is uncanny, and almost as soon as it starts, it's over. Streets that were once busy hives of activity, now a sad parade of ruins, clammy with the shadow of death, destruction everywhere, and things that were once human beings lying where they fell. The occupation is almost complete. Marines from the Japanese naval forces seemingly in command of the situation. But the Chinese have stopped the invaders dead in their tracks, keeping them from going further in a stubborn defense that earned the admiration of the world. Only the poor natives flee in panic from the shambles they once called home. Hurrying, they don't know where, fearful, terror-stricken in every conceivable means of transportation across the Garden Bridge to take them and their miserable possessions far away. And yet, nobody has the nerve to actually call it war, just because war hasn't been officially declared. Japan claims they're trying to rid the section of bandits. China says she's protecting herself from invasion. World powers write notes, and the League of Nations sends a committee to study the situation. Meanwhile, American Marines patrol their section of the international concession along the Suqiao River. It's a tough job keeping the natives from storming the settlement, the only place where they can feel free, because so far, the Japanese haven't dared to invade this part of the city. And the Marines have to protect American interests, too. Only a few natives at a time are allowed inside to provide against rioting and panic. But every once in a while, a desperate native takes a chance and sneaks through. England, too, adds her unit to the foreign army watching over the lives and property of their own citizens. And the drums of war come up like thunder out of China across the bay. The conquering hero arrives at Longport, in the center of Ireland, and it's a royal welcome he's getting. Mr. Eamon de Valera, who's just been announced the winner in the recent elections on the platform of a free Ireland. While in Dublin, President Cosgrave, with his aide Colonel O'Reilly, makes a last stand against overpowering odds. College Green is jammed with 100,000 people, occupying every square inch between Trinity College and Dame Street, listening to the candidates. But it doesn't do him much good. The crowd's restless, and there's plenty of opposition from the Fianna Fáil, the anti-government party. De Valera piles up a tremendous vote, accomplishing with ballots this year what he tried to do with bullets in 1923. But it's an Irish party, the quietest election they've had in years, incidentally, and the battle starts between the guards and the detectives and the agitators, all for the sake of Erin go Bragh.
One of the greatest seasons in history has just closed, and it was a tough struggle to select the All-America basketball team. But the board, under Chairman Walter E. Meanwell, coach of the University of Wisconsin, did a good job, as you'll see in these exclusive pictures. First is John Wooden of Purdue. He plays guard and made a sensational record in the Big Ten Conference, scoring 154 points, one of the fastest men in the game today, and the unanimous choice of the 8 men on the board. John's 21 years old and comes from Martinsville, Indiana. Next is Ed Krause of Notre Dame. Ed plays center, and he's also tackle on the football team. He's 19 years old, stands 6 feet 3, and weighs 212 pounds. He hails from Chicago, and he certainly knows how to call his shots. Then there's Elwood Romney, right forward of Brigham Young University. He's a junior and the leading scorer in the league. In 12 games, he accounted for 161 points. Elwood is also a 6-footer, and his hometown is St. George, Utah. Then there's Richard Linthicum, University of California in Los Angeles. Richard's a forward and scored 77 points in 11 games. He's over 6 feet, and he's 22 years old. Richard's from Hollywood, where the rest of the stars come from. And last is Louis Berger, guard, University of Maryland, who scored 141 points this year. He's 21 and comes from Fort Myer, Virginia. Also a letterman in baseball and football, and general, all-round regular guy. Some team. Coming events cast their shadows before, and boy, what a shadow. When the babe starts worrying about getting into condition, you know that only 3 months more, and throughout the land will resound the cry of play ball. Already, Ruth is down to 225. That's just about his normal playing weight, and he intends to stay there with the help of Artie McGovern, his trainer. And he's got to get into shape for his annual salary battle, too, even though McGovern takes advantage of the babe. Ruth's in no position to get back at him, but give Artie enough rope and he'll hang himself.
Famous finals of the 10,000-meter race. The world's fastest skaters have qualified for the event. The rules require that each man has to take the lead for 2 circuits, and the pace is slow at the start. They're saving their strength for the final sprint that'll bring the victory to either Canada, Norway, or America. The excitement grows as they get closer to the last round. The skates begin to move faster and faster. The bell laps. The final circuit. Jaffe has flashed ahead of Ballinger of Norway and Stack of Canada. It's a free-for-all now, and the crowd goes insane. Close to the ribbon, Jaffe heaves himself ahead and comes through to win by a nose. With Eddie Wedge, a good sliding partner, into 4th place. One of the most sensational finishes ever seen in an Olympic meet, giving America a clean sweep in the skating event, thanks to Mr. Irving Jaffe of New York. The time was 19 minutes, 13 6/10 seconds. And now we'll have another thrill. America's trailing Switzerland in the bobsled run by half a second. It's the last chance, and it's up to Curtis and Hubert Stevens. They're off like a flash on their steel runners. which they've just heated so they'll bite into the snow. The daredevil drivers throw all caution overboard. They keep their feet away from their brake. It's now or never. Faster and faster down the Hugenberg run, around those terrible curves at a mile a minute, thinking only of the wonderful Swiss driver Capodret and his record run. Only superhuman handling can win this race. And it does. A new world record by a couple of bobsled maniacs, the Stevens brothers, real champions. America congratulates you.
Willard Blaine's been working on an idea for a long time, and here it is. It's his theory that man can imitate the flight of a bird, so he's designed this 34-pound outfit. He's trying to imitate a bird. All right, an ostrich, but it's just sort of a practice run. Soon as he gets warmed up, he's gonna do his stuff. That is, if he's not overheated. And now, whoomp. Not so good. But you need a high takeoff, and so he'll try the Thames River Bridge, 50 feet over the icy water. It's a thrilling moment. There, but it's no use. And another invention goes the way of all fish. I guess something went wrong. The idea sounded practical, and it should have worked according to the plans. It must have been something he ate. Poor old Blaine. And to make it worse, the state threatens to step in and arrest him for flying an unlicensed aircraft. It's a cruel world. One day, Arthur Sullivan was just sort of fooling around when he suddenly discovered he had a brand new talent. It kind of surprised him, and it surprised us too when we heard about it. He's perfectly normal, and nobody can explain it. So you'll just have to take it the way it is. But it's done one thing. It's brought out into the broad daylight a question that nobody dared bring up before, and that is, do you exhale? His name is Salon V, and he was born in Lamennais, France, where the fine Percherons come from. Salon's one of the most magnificent specimens of horse flesh in the world. And just think, a horse weighing 1,500 pounds is considered to be a large animal, but this monster weighs twice that. He's 21 hands high, about 7 feet from forefoot to shoulder, and measures 10 feet around his middle. Salon has won the blue ribbon in every show he's appeared in. That's a horse, isn't it? Boy. The world hasn't gone crazy yet, but a lot of funny things happen. The carpenter is Mr. Pfefferly, and he made one of them first for a joke, but the girls are taking it up, and now he's got all he can do to fill orders. The millinery's made out of thin veneer, steamed to make it soft, guaranteed against everything but splinters. It's goofy. But then, when you can buy automobile tires in a drugstore, so why not hats in a carpenter's shop? He's doing so much business in mahogany millinery, he's thinking of giving up building houses. No mortgages, no strikes, no weather to grieve about. And he should worry if styles change. All he does is chop down another tree. Mr. Pepperly's having a new sign painted for his carpenter shop. Shingle hats for shingle hair. He would. But never fear. Here's your veneer, dear. Here's the most revolutionary idea in the history of transportation. And wait till you see how it works over there on the shores of Bristol Channel. And it's quite simple. The big outside wheel turns while the car and engine are held at the bottom by the force of gravity. It's operated by a 2.5 horsepower motor on a couple of teaspoons of gasoline. Even now, it can hit a speed of 30 miles an hour, and the inventor claims he'll eventually reach 10 times that. It's called a Dynasphere. Why, nobody knows. But all the big automobile men are very much interested in it. Imagine getting a flat tire on one of those things.
Eggs separated by machinery. Considered impossible, but here it is. They're carried on a conveyor to a jigsaw that removes the small end of the eggs protruding through the bottom of the container. A divider separates the yolks from the whites, each traveling down a private channel, minding their own business and not bothering anybody. And while this is going on, the shells fall into a separate compartment. Going a little further, the whites and yolks are exposed for inspection and go into their own containers after the operators had a chance to remove blood spots and elderly eggs and other objections by means of a vacuum cleaner arrangement. And the money it saves. Eggs ought to be cheaper now if the hens stay in business.
Now, as promised, here are some of the popular tunes of 1932. How many of these are you familiar with? Bing Crosby and the Mills Brothers, two real big power acts at the time, had a hit with Dinah. Rudy Valley, Brother Can You Spare a Dime? Now, Rudy Valley, he was America's first teen idol, very big star at the time, and a lot of people might know his name today, but I would have to say that his song, Brother Can You Spare a Dime, it was such a huge hit, that's probably more well-known to people today than him. Louis Armstrong, All of Me. Fred Astaire, Night and Day. Duke Ellington, It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. Last but not least, the movies of 1932. Now, this isn't a comprehensive list. I don't have every movie made or released in 1932 from all over the world listed here. A lot of movies that are big money makers and or award winners, they become forgotten over time. Not all of them kind of stay in the minds of movie fans forever and ever. Sometimes movies that underperform when they're first released become fan favorites later on. Some of the movies I talk about here will be genuine hits of 1932, but all of the movies that I'm mentioning here are going to be significant. Tarzan the Ape Man. Now, this wasn't the first Tarzan movie ever made, but it was the first one that starred Johnny Weissmuller, who went on to star in 12 Tarzan movies altogether. And this is also the first time that anyone heard Tarzan yell. Tarzan never yelled before. That was sort of something that Weissmuller just kind of put in there, and it has stayed with the character ever since. Charlie Chan's Chance. It's an entry in the very long-running Charlie Chan series. The Charlie Chan films are really quite clever. There's nothing else quite like them, nothing else that was like them at the time. There was a lot of imitators of Charlie Chan, but nothing was exactly like it. There was always some pretty solid mysteries going on there, and just a lot of neat things to see, especially in an old movie from that period. But there was no shortage of things like, trap doors and hidden rooms and different gadgets, and Charlie Chan himself was such a clever character. This particular movie is considered lost. Not all old films were well preserved, and some of them just got lost over time and haven't been found yet. I think the only reason that people still remembered this title at all is just for the fact that, it's Charlie Chan. But at the time, audiences would have liked it. So hopefully someday, this film gets uncovered and people can watch it and enjoy it again. The Sign of Four with Arthur Wantner as Sherlock Holmes. Now, Arthur Wantner, he was playing Sherlock Holmes long before Basil Rathbone did, who, Basil Rathbone, as you may or may not know, he kind of became the iconic Sherlock Holmes. That's probably the first person that anyone thinks about as being Sherlock Holmes is Basil Rathbone. But Arthur Wantner had made 5 films. of Sherlock Holmes before Basil even started his first. And The Sign of Four is the third movie in Arthur Watner's series. And nowadays, it's probably a lot more known to people just because it is on so many different public domain releases, and it's a lot easier to find now than it was back then. At the time, I don't think it was a real huge hit, but nowadays, a lot of people are discovering Arthur Watner's Sherlock Holmes films. Horse Feathers with the Marx Brothers. When there was 4 Marx Brothers, Zeppo was with them at the time, and I always felt Zeppo was kind of underrated. I know a lot of times they say, oh, he left, he didn't add much or anything else. It says, no, I kind of think he did, It says he was a little bit more polished, and it did seem to me to be a more complete comedy team when he was in it, even though they are probably better known as just being the 3, Groucho, Harpo, and Chico. But I do think Zeppo played a part too, and this is one of their early hits that a lot of people are familiar with and know. Pack Up Your Troubles with Laurel and Hardy. Now, Laurel and Hardy, as far as comedy teams go, for me, they're at the top of the list. They are just so funny, and their movies are so watchable by everyone. And you're talking almost a century after the fact. In this movie right here, this is a funny film. It's straight funny film. But the subject matter, if it wasn't for them being such good comedians and for the writers just being so funny, it could have played out as a drama. Thank goodness it didn't. And what I mean by that is, like, this movie it's actually set in World War I in 1917, and then just shortly after World War I. And the subject of it is that Laurel and Hardy, they had a friend in World War I. Their friend is killed in action. At the same time that has happened, this friend's wife had left him, and their daughter ended up going into a foster home. And so Laurel and Hardy, they take it upon themselves to go rescue their friend's daughter from this foster home where she's not being treated very well, and to take her to his parents, to his friend's mom and dad, who are actually, as it comes to find out, the little girl's grandparents are wealthy. So it all turns out, and it's all a happy ending and everything. But yeah, if it wasn't for how funny Laurel and Hardy were, and just how funny the story was made itself with all the different sight gags and everything else, but it's very watchable. I highly recommend it. The Dentist with W.C. Fields. Now, this is a comedy short. This wasn't a feature. W.C. Fields, he was making features at the time. However, this is just a short film. And why this is significant now is it's pretty wild. I mean, even by pre-code standards of the day, Fields, he's out there in this one. This has so much humor that is so not PC friendly today. There's different racial humor. There's definitely some suggestive sexual type humor in there. He does throw in a swear or two in there. These are all things that really were not as common in old movies as you think back then. But in this one, it is there. It's very funny. The story of it is very funny. But this is one of those things, I think it kind of picked up steam later on. It might have been popular for the time, but it was just a comedy short. Nowadays, I think it's probably been seen, and it's a little bit more common to find nowadays probably than it had been decades earlier. Destry Rides Again starred Tom Mix in his very first talking picture. He had been a very big Western star during the silent era, and this was quite an event right here that, he's talking for the first time. He'd been around for so many years, and now he's making talking pictures. And you may have heard of this title. There was another film in 1939 made called Destry Rides Again that starred Jimmy Stewart in it. It has nothing in common with this film other than the title. The original Scarface film. Now, this is one of those movies that it was not a hit in the theaters at the time. It's more famous now than it was then, especially due to the 1983 remake with Al Pacino. That's a whole nother story. That one was very successful and still continues to be successful. The reason that this one didn't hit at the box office is because it was deemed too controversial. There were censorship battles of it. It was pulled from theaters. This was one of those films that was considered just a little bit too edgy at the time. A little bit too violent, a little bit too seedy. I don't know. It was just a lot of uncomfortable material that people just didn't want to deal with in movies back then. So, unfortunately, it just didn't make it. It wasn't due to lack of it, being good or good acting or good writing or good action or anything like that. It was just one of those that people just weren't ready for yet, or they thought they weren't ready for it anyway. And it was more or less just kind of canceled out of existence. The Mummy, the one that started it all, with Boris Karloff. In the previous year, he had hit it real big with Frankenstein. Now, this is not picking on his acting ability or anything else, but I'm not really sure that he's showing us his range in this film. I never really thought of his Mummy as being much different than Frankenstein, just with bandages, but it was a huge hit, and it's inspired so many different sequels and remakes, and I do think that a lot of the more current Mummy remakes are actually better. I mean, they're better films, better stories, better acting, all across the board. But this is significant because this is the very first one, and it's still memorable with audiences. Whenever you think of The Mummy, you think of Boris Karloff. Now, Bela Lugosi had hit really big earlier in 1931 with Dracula. And after that, his fate was just sealed. I mean, it says, hey, let's put this guy in more bad guy parts. So 1932 saw two significant Bela Lugosi films in The Murders in the Rue Morgue and White Zombie. Night After Night, Mae West's film debut. Mae West became major sex symbol of her era. And even as she became older, she was still perceived as, the ultimate sex symbol. Now, there were bad girls before in movies and after, but there was no bad girl quite like Mae West. She wasn't a bad girl. She was bad. I mean, she was trashy. She was sleazy. That was the first time anybody had been so overtly sexual. And she was. I mean, she really had the qualities, everything that was naughty in a woman, and very risque. She had to fight a lot of censorship battles, and it wasn't always smooth sailing for her, but people found her entertaining, and she always had an audience, and people still remember her. And to wrap things up, some more important films from 1932. The Last of the Mohicans, Mr. Robinson Crusoe, Bird of Paradise, A Farewell to Arms, 13 Women, Me and My Gal, Goodnight Vienna, Grand Hotel, and Tiger Shark. Thank you very much for watching. If you've watched this video the whole way through, you're a real trooper. If you didn't watch this all the way through and you just kind of skipped around a lot, go back. You missed some good stuff. And don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.